G'day, I am Mordechai Becher,
And I am Yoshua Karsh.
and unfortunately, this last week we heard of the passing away of Rabbi Avraham Gurevitz. Rav Avraham Gurevitz, known as primarily nowadays as the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Moshe, which has some other name, but I forgot what it is. There's some name people call it, but in any case, Ner Moshe, famous yeshiva in Israel. And Rav Gurevitz was a Rebbe prior to that at Mishkan HaTorah, otherwise known as Splitry, and prior to that at ITRI, Israel Torah Research Institute, where we, together with a lot of friends of ours, studied back in the Jurassic period. And so we thought we'd talk in this podcast about some of our Rebbeim, some of our teachers during that amazing period of time that we were studying in yeshiva and kollel, etc., and just to talk about them. We have no actual plan or course here, but we'll start with Rabbi Gurevitz.
So I think for us, I think what happened was Rav Usher Rubenstein, a blessed memory, was our first Rebbe. Like he was, right? We had him for part of the year.
Not for me. I came. Oh yes, actually, yes, correct.
Yeah. We had him for part of the year, and then Rabbi Gurewitz took over.
This was in 1978. 1978.
Right. At some point in that year, he took over. So we had both him and Rav Usher in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just remember how down to earth he was. Like he sat in the back a lot of times. He would sit like in the very back row. All the other Rabbeim would sit on the Mizrach Vant. They would sit up in the front facing us. But Rabbi Gurevitz, he was like always in the back. There'd always be Bachrim around him, talking to him and learning, but also hearing his opinions on different subjects. I remember that first Purim. No, it wasn't the first Purim. It was the second Purim.
I remember. I don't remember.
It was the second Purim. You don't remember it because you were part of it. You were completely unconscious during it. But it was the next year because I remember Akiva Tor and all those people were there, and they didn't come till our second year. But I remember like it was just indicative of how Bachram got along with him, really felt connected to him. He could be, first of all, people loved him. I mean, there were students who absolutely loved him. And he clearly showed affection to students, but he could also be sarcastic and he could be blunt. Extremely blunt. Yeah.
Yeah, he always used to have some commentary on life in the United States. And I remember I didn't know much about the United States. I came from Australia.
Yeah.
I remember he pulls a cutting from a newspaper out of his pocket and shows it to me. It's an advertisement for a meat restaurant, Glut Kosher, in New York, in which it's during the 9 days when we don't eat meat. It advertises a siyum every night, in which
you're talking about 45 years ago.
Yes,
this was going on, not correct. Yesterday. 45 years ago.
A siyum every night. I guess the mashgiach made a siyum every night, so it would allow anyone in the restaurant to eat meat. And there was a belly dancer as well featured in this. And he says to me, "This is America." I said, "Oh my God, right now. We don't have that in Australia."
No, but you already knew from any American teachers that you had experience.
Yes,
that's probably was the case if you extrapolate.
But this is in the religious world.
Yes,
and he also. I remember there was one. I was not actually in his class for a while. For most of the time, I was actually in Reb Chaim Brand, who is Israeli.
Oh, you went to Reb Chaim Brand.
I went to Reb Chaim Brand.
That was your first year, because I went to Reb Chaim Brand the next year, but you went during your first year. So you may not. Did you have him though? You must have had him.
I had him very briefly. but I do remember, like, I don't know, some guy, he made some, gave an explanation of the Gemara, and guys were asking on it, and he said, why are you objecting so much? You guys jealous because you didn't come up with it? Right? This is the type of stuff he used to
Yeah.
say. And he once, I was not in the class when he did this, but there were a group of guys who we recognized. It was sometime in the middle of a lengthy semester, a lengthy zman, and he told the guys, we're going to the Dead Sea. And they said, what? And he took a bunch of guys in his car to the Dead Sea, Yam HaMelach, to swim and hike.
They have pictures. We saw
Pictures of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was right, and absolutely brilliant. And I remember, like, once he was it was just after it was Mariv, it was in Mishkan HaTorah, and they'd said Baruch Hu. The Chazan had said Baruch Hu as Hashem Avorach, and someone was in the middle of a conversation with Rabbi Gurovitz, and he continued the conversation after Baruch Hu. And then someone came over and said, you're not right. Mishnah Brura says you can't do it. So he came the next day with a written responsum, a tshuva, showing that it was permitted to do that. And he said it was based on the Gemara. The Gemara says in Yuma that if you see a Torah scholar who transgressed a sin at night, don't suspect him, because by morning he'll have
Asa tshuva.
done teshuva,
which Asa means tshuva.
He'll have repented. But the Hasidim understand, if you see a Litvak, a Misnagid, a non-Hasidic, who did a sin at night, don't worry, by morning he'll have written a responsum that shows that it's permitted. So he said, there you go, that's what he actually did. And he would sit under the no smoking sign.
Yes, smoking.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of that. You know, guys, I think, were attracted to that rebellion.
100%. 100%.
I remember one idea that he said, which is phenomenal. He was saying that, you know, he used to carry Rav Shach's books or something for him to when he was in Ponevezh. So Rav Shach was giving a shir to the whole yeshiva, shir klali. And someone asked a question in the middle, and Rav Shach says, that's an excellent kasha. I have to rethink this. He closes the books and he walks out. And Rav Gurovitz says to him, but there's a simple answer to that question. Rav Shach says, and he tells him, and he says, yes, but the fact that I didn't think of it at that moment, obviously there's something wrong with my class. I have to rethink it. So Rav Gurovitz said, that is the explanation. The Gemara says you should only receive Torah from a rabbi who's like a malach, like an angel. So he said, what does it mean, like an angel? She said, when Manoach and his wife saw the angel, it says that the angel went up to heaven in a fiery pillar. And then the Pasuk says, I don't remember the exact language, it says, and it was when he did not return, as Yada Manoach, then Manoach knew that he was an angel. So Rav Gurovitz said, because had he been a human, I mean, seriously, because someone goes up to heaven in a pillar of fire, you're not convinced they're an angel? He said, no, because had it been a human who did this through trickery or some way or miracle, he would have come back and
just
said,
to see a reaction.
Bad, eh? Yeah. Right? You got a pigeon, kvittel, you know, as a term, right? So he says the fact that he didn't come out, he says that's what he saw in Rosh Shach. He didn't go back.
Nice.
So that made him a mullah. That was one explanation he gave. Yeah.
Also, I don't remember another Rebbe maybe a Rabbi Schwartz. Rabbi Schwartz, as far as a Rebbe who was writing Sfarim in real time. Yes. So, like, if people asked, I remember Jonathan Zeffrin asked him a question, and then it ended up in the next volume of Dvar Avram.
Or Avraham.
Or Avram, I mean, not Dvar Avram.
Multiple volumes of that book. On the Haggadah, on Hilchos Talmud Torah of the Rambam, on various Masechtas, on different parts of Tanakh. Yes, he was a very prolific author.
Yeah.
And I remember Rav Asher Rubinstein said about him, he said when we were students in Ponevezh, we both finished Shas. He says, but I finished at Bekias in a quick survey. He says he finished at Be'iyun in depth. Remember him telling me that. So that was something about him, and very also extremely passionate about truth.
Yeah.
Did not bear fools lightly.
Nope.
And
sometimes you'd see these guys who weren't even from the yeshiva. They'd end up in the back of the basement, and you'd see them in animated discussion with him in the back there. And people are trying to figure out, who are these guys? They're just some guys from outside the yeshiva that heard about something he had said and came in. And he did not shy away from
Oh,
having at it with those guys. Yeah. Yeah.
so okay, and then you mentioned Rav Asher Rubinstein. So
Yeah.
I just received a few weeks ago from the family a 3-volume book about him called Mi Ya'aleh. And it's a treasure trove of stories, etc., etc. But Rav Asher Rubinstein, who came from Long Island and also went to Ponevezh, and he became the mashkiach, really. He was much more about giving musar, rebuke, and ways of looking at life and the world, and guiding people, rather than giving a class. That's what he did much more, and he continued doing that.
Although
into split.
we did, or at least I did, I think you did too, heard shir from him our first year. Yeah, absolutely. We did hear shir from him.
Yeah. And also a brilliant person, but just someone who was full of simcha, of joy of life, and focus. I remember standing on the street, on the side in Unsdorf, and standing next to Bernie Weiss, which I believe now lives in Cincinnati or Indianapolis, something like Cincinnati. And we're standing there, and it wasn't a wide, and Rav Asher Rubinstein, it was before morning service, so it was early, it was in the morning, and Rav Asher Rubinstein walked by us on the way to prayers, and he didn't see us. We're literally standing right there, and Bernie Weiss said to me, he says, every fiber and molecule of his being is going to Shachris.
Yeah,
that's why he didn't see us. It's like just completely immersed in that. And I remember he used to, there were some things which I saw in the book, which I remembered because they interviewed me, which I told them. But remember, he once said, it's only permitted to be depressed, to be sad once a day. Or I think he said 3 times a day. He says, when in the silent prayer, you're saying, I sinned. The rest of the time, every bracha, you've got to be happy. That's one of the things he said.
Nice. I remember I came to Itri from Brisk Yeshiva in Chicago. Now, Brisk in Chicago is the Soloveitchik family. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik was the Rosh Yeshiva, and then 3 of his sons were Rabbeim there, and there were a few other people that had been Talmidim of Rav Aaron that were also Rabbeim there. And the general atmosphere in the yeshiva was of deep respect, but for, a sense of deep respect for your Rebbe. But there wasn't necessarily a closeness. What I mean by that is, I mean, I shouldn't say it entirely. I know people felt to some degree close, but there was never a time when your Rebbe would put his arm around you. Like that, it was very formal, a little bit like cult, a little cult. It was cult to Litvak, a bit, like pretty much. That was the experience.
Cult, Rabbi Karsh means the Yiddish word cult for cold, not the English word cult.
Right, for cult. That's a good point.
I'm just pointing out, so not everyone in the audience understand, all 3 people, not everyone understands Yiddish. Yeah.
Yes. So I ended up at Itri, and he was my Rebbe then the first year. And I remember like going up to him and asking him a question. And while I'm asking the question, he put his hand on my shoulder. And at first I'm like, what is going on? It seems like something strange is happening. I wasn't sure what it was. And then I saw an actual expression of warmth. Again, the Rabbeim in Brisk, they were not mean, and they were very sincere, but it just did not, that warmth. And he would squeeze your hand, especially if he was like giving you musser. They would be with a smile, but he would squeeze your hand. And you and I were at a chasana. This is already, we're on in our careers already. We're at a Zephyrin
Oh,
chasana.
yes, that's
We
right.
were at a Zephyrin chasana, and Rav Usher was there at the chasana. And there was some stuff going on that you and I had sort of gotten ourselves involved in, and he was very worried about us. And he was sitting in between both of us, squeezing our hands, just like it had been, like decades before, 30 years before, when he had done it. It was like nothing changed. He was still worried about us and somehow causing mischief.
And I remember he gave a subtle rebuke to me. I remember as I walked in, he says, "Ah, the famous Rabbi Becher who entertains and educates people all over the world." He said entertains first and then
Yes.
educates. And I type of like felt, oh boy. Yeah. So he had
Yeah.
he gave that rebuke. I remember he gave a class. It was about preparing us for dating when we were
Yeah.
about ready to get married. And he said, of course, you'll wear your hat and jacket and your suit, the three-piece suit and the tie. I said, what about someone who doesn't regularly wear a hat? Should he wear a hat on the date? And Rav Asher slaps me in the back and he says, everyone in this yeshiva wears a hat. And I said, I'm asking for a friend. So he slaps me again. He says, he should ask his mashkiach. I said, he is. And then and
He put up with he put
he
up
put up with a lot, yes.
with a lot with us.
Uh,
But he
but
and he of all the Rabbeim, I mean, he was the one who, at least in those first few years, he was the one we were constantly involved with.
oh
Whatever,
yeah,
and also Bein Hastorim, and I mean Bein Hazmanim, not just Bein Hastorim, Bein Hazmanim. Like especially when Mishkan Torah started, we actually ate. I think we had breakfast in his house.
I don't remember that. Maybe we
I
did.
I I do remember we had the when it was the first Bein Hazmanim. It must have been Pesach Bein Hazmanim or something. You might have gone. Do you think you went back maybe
I
to
was in
see
England, I think.
for that?
I went to England for that. Yeah.
So, anyways, we were eating, breakfast in his house. And he was one of those people who always was available for us to talk through stuff. And but
When
I
I got
loved the fact that it was just, how long ago could that have been? Like 15 years ago, something like that, when he still felt like
yeah.
we were these little Bahrain that had found some mischief.
I remember when I got married, my family came from Australia for the wedding. He invited them for Shabbos, and we ate at his house for Shabbos.
Awesome.
Everyone loved it, and he also found me a tailor to make a suit for me. The name of the tailor was Zalman Rob. I remember that. The
Uh-huh.
suit was just he was a good tailor, but the style was for a 50-year-old man, not a 25-year-old person. And but it did come with two pairs of trousers. Any case, so that was yeah. And he used to say things sometimes which would be just to make a point. He would exaggerate. He'd say something like, I remember he said something like 5 minutes on Rehov Ben Yehuda, 5 minutes on Ben Yehuda Street is equal to 100 hours, takes away 100, it's something like 100 hours in the yeshiva, in the Beit Midrash. Every 10 minutes you spend on Ben Yehuda, you lose this, like, and guys were saying divide by 10, multiply by 100, that type.
Well, remember when the younger guys started coming to Mishkan Torah and they experienced Rav Usher's, I don't remember what night, Tuesday night schmoozin, or there was one night of the week where he gave his scary schmoozin like that, like where he'd
Oh,
say
yes.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I remember when younger Bachrim would come in after that first schmooze, we knew to go over and talk to them. They needed like a debriefing,
Yes.
like and some like therapy to prevent long-term trauma, because it was so like scary, when he would,
Yes.
yeah.
But I remember when he accepted me to Yeshiva, I think I told the story on the podcast when I came to Itri. Didn't I tell that story?
I have completely blotted out
We may
anything
have.
you've said on the
But
podcast.
when I was in Israel with my parents a year before I went to Yeshiva,
No
and
recollection of you talking about
I'm
it on the
looking around
podcast.
for a yeshiva to go to.
Yeah.
I eliminated a couple of them, and a couple of them eliminated me. And
Panovich, the Mir.
and I I met a guy at a bus stop, and he said, "Why don't you try Itri?" He said, "Take this bus to the end of the line, walk down the hill."
That's how it happened? You met
Yes,
some guy at a bus
I
stop?
met a guy at a bus stop. He
No,
said,
you
"Take this
definitely
bus,
did not tell that story.
take this bus, go to the end of the line, go down the hill." So I said, "Okay." Now, at the time, I was wearing jeans, t-shirt, and my hair was over my collar, and I had a kippah sruga, knitted yarmulke. So I walked into the Itri. I did not see the Beit Midrash. Had I seen the base Midrash, I would never have gone there.
This was during the Zman.
Yes.
Okay.
I went into the office. That was the first building you came to.
Right.
And Rav Asher Rubenstein was there. And he interviewed me.
Was Rav Neman there?
Yes, Rav Neman actually greeted me and to Rabbi Rubenstein, Rav Asher.
Okay.
And I was so impressed with his warmth and the feeling of love, and the fact that I failed the test miserably. I could not, answer questions on the Gemara, etc. But my Hebrew was good. And he said, "You're accepted. Just get a haircut before you come." And I went back to Australia. This is like December the year before I came, and I wrote a letter to the yeshiva, asking what would be the curriculum and required texts for the term. And they must have laughed their head. So I get a letter back on the official Itri letterhead.
It is the Israel Torah Research Institute.
Yes,
of course.
in the book. This story is in the book.
Oh, it is? Nice.
The whole story. And I get a letter back on the Itri letterhead, and it says Talmud, Tractate Yevomis, Musar, Mesilas Yesharim, Halacha, Mishnah Brura. And I said, "Great, excellent." So I got the curriculum. I came with the texts to Yeshiva, and on the plane on the way from Australia on the way to Itri, there's a guy from Australia who had been to Itri. He actually became Hasidic, became a Gera Chassid at Itri. So he comes over and we're schmoozing. And his father was a kosher butcher in Melbourne. So he had a salami with him and a knife. This is before 9/11. He says, "Want some salami?" I said, "Yeah, sure." Cuts off some salami because it's like bizarre encounter. And he says, "So what are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to Israel. I'm going to Yeshiva." He says, "Which one?" I said, "Itri." He says, "Itri, you need to get a haircut." I said, "I just had one." So I got to Israel. I had a second haircut.
Oh, you trusted him. That was good that you trusted him.
I trusted him. And I ended up having a third haircut because friends of mine in Israel told me that look, you got to get a black yarmulke, they said, and get another hair. So I had 3 haircuts before I went to Itri and traded my yarmulke. So that was quite interesting. And the first person I met when I went there was Rav Asher Rubenstein, and that's why I went. That's why I went there. So that was pretty crazy story, but that's how I was in.
Nice. That's ridiculous.
I went to Kol Torah, which I'd heard of in Australia.
Yeah.
And I imagine I walked into Kol Torah looking like that. They looked to me like I was an alien. And one of the rabbis says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm thinking of coming to this yeshiva." And he's like, "Yeah." He interviews me, failed miserably. He says, "Look," he says, "the only way you'll be able to come here is if I get a great recommendation, strong recommendation from my second cousin in Australia, who's a Rebbe in the high school he went to." I said, "What's his name?" Told me his name. That rabbi hated me. So I said, "Forget Kol Torah." So that's when I walked out of Kol Torah and I met someone an American guy. We were just schmoozing.
Uh-huh.
He said, "Try Itri." So, but it was Rav Asher, and it was quite amazing, And ended up, we all moved to Mishkan HaTorah, to Split Tree. It was a split from Itri.
Yeah.
And he became the mashgiach. He was the mashgiach there.
He was the American mashgiach in Itri.
Yes.
Rabbi Yoel Schwartz was like the Israeli mashgiach, and sort of overall mashgiach, but he fulfilled that role mashgiach in Itri too. Yeah,
Yes. Rav Yoel Schwartz was
he was young, by the way. You know, he was like 30
yes.
when we first met him.
Yeah.
He was quite young for that kind of job. Yeah, Rabbi Schwartz.
Rav Yoel Schwartz was amazing. He wrote probably about 30 books at
He's
least.
the other one who was writing Sfarim while we were
encyclopedic knowledge. Yes.
Yeah.
And he used to have a once a week. I lived for this. Once a week, he used to do a Q&A session. You could ask him questions on anything. We asked him about aliens. We asked him about just like anything, right? And good discourse on it. And brilliant man. And I remember one Elul, I think I must have slept in, and there's a knock at the door, and the door opens, and I hear someone say, "Milchama, milchama, war!" What? Oh my God! It was in Israel, right? And he says, "Milchemes hayetzer," the war with the evil inclination.
The fact that he came into our rooms to wake us up in his talis and tefillin.
Yes, he did that.
That level of Talmud Chacham is coming into your room to wake you up because we're late for minyan. That was ridiculous.
You can see that. And his roles were interesting because he was also mashgiach at Dvar Yerushalayim, which is a yeshiva for Balei Tshuva.
Yeah. He had connection to, well, eventually he was involved with
Nachal Haredi.
Nachal Haredi, and he was also involved with Bnei Noach. Yes. I think he might have either written a siddur for them or been involved with something like putting together a siddur for them. He was on the Sanhedrin.
He was one of the people who started the attempt at a Sanhedrin.
Sanhedrin.com.
Yeah. So he was a fascinating person, and very, very extreme about his love for the land of Israel.
When you came to him, I remember going up to him to tell him I'm going home for Pesach, and he would look me in the eye and go, "Asur."
Yeah.
Asur.
Yeah, right. How are you allowed to leave? It's unbelievable. Yeah. He said you could not go to Eilat because it was a doubt it may be considered outside the biblical borders of the land of Israel. So he was, he never left Israel. Yeah, never.
Did he ever leave Mea Sharim? I mean, he did.
Yeah,
obviously, he went to Itri.
He used to walk all over, but he used to go all over Israel. He used to write these books, and he did not believe in making a living from teaching Torah. So he and his wife ran a store on Malchei Yisrael Street called,
it was like women's clothing.
Srigat Yoel. It was embroidery and women's like head coverings and stuff. And they used to sell his books at the store. So
in the window.
Yes, I was walking past there. I was in Israel in this May. I was walking past the store, and
it still exists?
Yes, the name has changed, but it's still run by his family.
Really?
It's run by his family. And there's a little table outside. As I'm walking by, one of his granddaughters comes out and puts a book that he wrote on the table. It's called Sefer HaChinuch L'Doreinu, which was, I'm giving a course on reasons for the commandments in YU. And she comes out with this book, right? Sefer HaChinuch, updated for our generation, reasons for the commandments by Rav Schwartz. I look at the price. It was like 12 shekels. Something. It was like nothing.
Well, usually they were like small.
No, this one's thick. This one's about.
That was a thick one.
I walk into the store. I say, "Is this the accurate price?" They said, "Yeah, fine, okay." And I look inside. Who is it published by? It's published by the Schwartz Embroidery, by the store. They published it. It's amazing. You don't get people like that. And I remember I bought stuff in the store, and he had this note. He had a pad of receipts with carbon paper, and he'd write you a receipt, and so and he'd have a copy for taxes and stuff, and that's how you get it. And he used to walk everywhere. I don't know for sure he used to walk everywhere, but he used to. He very rarely took buses.
I remember being on a tour of the old city with him.
Oh yeah.
He did some kind of a walking tour, like on the outside, like showing us all, obviously issues of note from Bais Rishon and Bais Sheni and stuff. But it started outside the walls, and then it went inside. I remember we saw the broad wall. I also that he walks incredibly fast.
Yes.
And we were going through. So by the end of that walking tour, which was a couple of hours, I was absolutely exhausted. I remember him coming into this is what like one of the first few days I was in Itri. He came into our room and we were playing Mordechai Ben David. I was David Zeffron was my roommate at the time, and we were playing like it was a cassette in those days, and we're playing Mordechai Ben David, and he comes into the room and he goes, Asur, Asur. And I was explaining the Mordechai Ben David, hello, and he goes, which I thought would resolve the problem. And he goes, what do I care if it's Mordechai Ben David? It's also to listen to music. Why do you think you can listen to music?
Post-destruction of the temple.
Yes, yes.
I
It
remember
was such another world. Yeah.
we once had a talk by Rav Meltzer, Rav Shmayahu Meltzer, Yibodel L'chaim Tovim,
Yeah.
Rav Shmayahu Meltzer, who
Yep.
was very, I would say, hardcore. He gave a class about music. He spoke about music, and he talked about Mordechai Ben David as the beat from the street. That was the term he used, right? So nowadays, like Mordechai Ben David is like old school, traditional, from religious Jewish music. Then he said that's the beat from the street. And I remember just before the first vacation, Bein Hazmanim, and it was the last class before vacation. And
You're talking about like Sukkot?
I don't remember which. I think the one after Tisha B'Av vacation.
Oh, that one.
The summer.
Okay,
the summer. I'm type of like my mind is not on the Gemara. I'm thinking Eilat or Tiberius. That's basically what I'm bouncing back and forth. And I'm probably most people. Rav Meltzer, who is a total masmid. I mean, learning is that's all he's learning. He walks in and he starts the class by saying, I love Bein Hazmanim. I love vacation. So to me, it was like he would have walked in and said, I love lobster or cheeseburger. It was like, I love vacation. We're like,
yeah.
And he says, I can learn any Masechta I want. That's what he loved about vacation. He can learn any tractate of the Talmud he wants. He's not limited to what the yeshiva has him teach.
I don't know if you remember, Rav Shalom Shvadron came to Itri to get us to sign that we are going to learn one of the weeks of that Bein Hazmanim. There was like there's 3 weeks to Bein Hazmanim, and he came in and he announced that he was doing this thing. He was going from yeshiva to yeshiva to yeshiva, and he announced that he's got this project going. And then one at a time, we were called in to, there was like a office room. Reb Shalom Shvadron was there, and I don't remember who else was there, somebody from the yeshiva. And it was just you and them and this thing, this paper to sign.
No pressure.
And they would ask you. No pressure. And they would ask, well, are you interested in doing this? There was no chance that
I don't remember that. That may have been before.
I particularly remember because I smoked at the time, and he could smell it on me, Rav Shalom Shvadron, and he says, Atam Hashen? And I said, yes. He goes, I also did when I was young. You could tell from his voice he must have done it, whatever. But it was a bond between us. I felt like a close bond with Rav Shalom Shvadron at that time. It was just like such a... Yeah. And also Beit Safat, just living next to all the Kolo guys who would be like living in the Arab.
Yeah, those who don't know,
Beit Safafa.
Itri Yeshiva was in Talpiot, type of the end of Talpiot. You could actually, it was so far out, you could walk to the Rachel's tomb, Kever Rachel, from there. We did that occasionally. You could walk to Beit Lechem, and it was right next to an Arab village called Beit Safafa. And Rav Mordechai Elephant, the head of the yeshiva, Rosh Yeshiva, and a number of the guys in the Kollel lived in the Arab village, which was a 5-minute walk from the yeshiva.
Because that's how he essentially, that building, that campus had been a Jordanian
military hospital, I think it was, or something like that.
And he squatted there
Yeah.
right after the Six-Day War, and he was given the property.
Yeah.
So he owned the yeshiva and like a whole swath of land, even in Beit Safafa. Like
Yes.
he was also that was he was quite an experience, Rabbi Elephant.
My gosh, yes. I remember they used to have guys go up to his house to make a minyan on Shabbos because he couldn't walk. It was difficult for him to walk down to the yeshiva. So they called, there was like exactly, there were 9 guys. So I was one of them. And so it was my first few months. I did not own a suit or a tie or a hat. And we go up there and my accent was pure, modern Hebrew, etc. So they called, we go up there. They didn't realize I was a Levi. So they gave someone else Levi, which means they were forced to give me maftir and haftorah. So I said the brachot and the maftir and the haftorah in my, Israeli Hebrew accent, no hat, no jacket, etc. And loudly, Rabbi Elephant loudly whispers to someone, "Who's the Tzioni? Who's the Zionist?" And someone says, "He learns here." And he says, "Oi." And that was it. That was my first encounter with Rabbi Elephant. That was that was pretty wild.
He was from another world. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he functioned in a complete. I remember he used to give shir klali like once a week,
Mhm.
or was it once a week? I don't know. It was pretty
Less
often.
frequent
Yeah,
than that.
but it was fairly often.
Yeah.
And he would sit like
On
on
a
top,
table on the stage.
right by the Aron, right?
Yes.
Like the Aron Kodesh was behind him, and he was like he'd sit there with a table, and he'd be smoking,
A
you
pipe.
know, yeah.
He would spend the first few minutes of the class doing the pipe, and you'd be sitting there. He the tobacco, taps it down, lights it, and then he would give class with his
And
pipe.
he somehow had Kisvei Yad from the Briskerov that
Yes.
nobody else had. He had like proprietary like uh handwritten notes or something from the Briskerov that nobody else had.
He was a
And
student
they
of Leib Mullen. Yeah, he was a student of Leib Mullen, who was from,
so somehow he got access to them. And I remember it was sort of like even the family was trying to get at some of them. But I remember that was part of the subject. I remember the guys, he used to have somebody come up like Yerachmiel Fried or Chaim Pass, or some of these guys would go up to learn with him before, like while he was preparing it.
2 in the morning.
And
Yeah.
you'd have these people like Rav Shlomo Fisher or Rav Chaim Brandt or some of these, these people that they would, ask him questions while he was giving the Shir Kloli. There'd be like uh, animated discussion between him and the people because they were all supposed to stay for
And
his
these
Shir
people were
Kloli.
the most brilliant people you've ever met.
Rav
There was
Bretler, Rav
Rav
Michal
Shlomo,
Zilber.
Michal Zilber, who used to do Shas every year, and Rav Shlomo Fisher, who knew everything.
They all had to sit there. They all stood there, and he would give his Shir Kloli. It was quite it was and
It was
yeah.
a theatric, very theatric and very dramatic. The
Our
whole
first
situation.
year, the finance minister from South Africa came to speak to us
Oh yeah,
because he was negotiating a coal deal between Israel and South Africa.
and he
And
introduced people from different
yes, from the
countries.
country. Did you represent Australia?
Yes, I did. I was the only
Nice.
Australian in the yeshiva, he says, from
Uh,
Australia. And then there was a group of Russian Jews, brilliant guys, brilliant guys, who he'd said just sit on the couch and completely ignore everything that is happening. And he walks by them, and we're all standing there and introduced to this South African government official, and Rav Elephant, and there's a group of these Russian guys just sitting at the couch, looking like that, ignoring everything. He says, "This is a group of Russian intellectuals from the Soviet Union."
intellectuals.
They were actually Russian intellectuals from the Soviet Union, all of them, right? But
But they
he
had to play a
deliberately,
stereotypical role.
he said, just absolutely do not acknowledge us, ignore us as we walk by. And that's what he says. And they're like sitting there, like, just thinking and deliberately ignoring everything going on. It was just very dramatic. It was like hilarious. Uh, so
I had a moment or two with him, and I once he had once been upset with me about something, and then he invited me to be his guest at the yeshiva for the next Shabbos. And this is when Mishkan Torah was just starting. I remember you looked like you were in mourning. You looked terrible. You looked absolutely terrible. And I thought it was because you were so upset about the whole splittery thing that was going on. It ends up that you spent the night on Masada, and that's why you looked.
not Masada. I was in Ein Gedi.
Oh, En Gedi. You spent the night
I
in En
went for a
Gedi.
hike with a friend of mine in Ein Gedi, and we got lost, and we ended up spending the night in on the top of this plateau with only one water between us. It was not good, right? So yeah, that was
So because I had
hydration.
already been away from Itri for like 3 days,
Couple
it
of
felt
weeks.
like it was 6 months that I was already away. And when I came back, it's like I've seen long lost friends who I haven't seen in forever. And there you were looking
Almost was lost.
so terrible. And I was sure that it was because this whole thing with Splitter was happening. But anyways, he hadn't been happy with me. But then he invited me like for Shabbos to come for Shabbos. So, and he explained to me, he goes, I just want to explain things to you. He said the Rogachover was famous for yelling at his Bachrim. He said there was a guy who once came who was looking for a chassan for his daughter, a wealthy guy who came to the Rogachover, and he asked if he could sit and watch the Rogachover giving shir and like just to get a sense of the Talmidim. And so after the shir, the Rogachover says, I think this particular guy would be a good choice for you. And he says, that particular guy, you were yelling at the guy. You called him a behemoth at one point. And the Rogachover said, my behemoths are Talmidei Chachamim. And that's what Rabbi Elephant was saying. I know I yelled at you, but just remember what the Rogachover said.
There was a guy who used to go jogging, and one of the Israelis complained that they saw one of the American students jogging in shorts. And so Rav Elephant calls him over, and he says, I hear you running around in your gachkas, your underwear. He says, you have to stop or you're out of the yeshiva. So he says that they're not guts, not underwear, they're gym shorts. He says, don't play semantics with me. You run around them again, you're out.
Yeah. Now, you said that you were in Rav Brandt's, Rav Chaim Brandt's shir.
Yeah.
And I also was but it was not until my next year. We went to Rav Meltzer for the first part of the year, and then I went to Rav Chaim Brandt for like after Pesach.
He was a Yerushalmi, genuine Yerushalmi, and
I think he was Reb Shlomo Fisher's brother-in-law or something. He was somehow,
maybe.
I think it was somehow related to Reb Shlomo Fisher.
And Reb Shlomo Fisher was a unique individual who is not so well known in the world. His brother was the head of the Badatz, Rav Yisrael Yaakov Fisher. Rav Shlomo wrote a number of amazing sforim and was on the Beit Din Hagadol of the Rabbanut, Chief Rabbinate, based in, and he was the Google of the yeshiva. Basically, he would just stand there, and people would ask him questions on absolutely everything all time. And he'd stay at the yeshiva. He had rooms in the dorm where he'd stay until
during the week.
Then he'd go home for Friday Shabbos. Give a shir at his house Friday morning. I used to go to, where guys from a whole bunch of different yeshivas would come to his house in Mea She'arim, Rehov, Ethiopia, and hear shir from him Friday morning. And he'd occasionally give these philosophy classes, hashkafa shirim at Itri, and he'd use words. I remember once he was talking about two types of belief: transcendental faith and immanent. And he said, "Emunah immanentali, ve'emunah transcendentali." And one of the Israelis asked me, "What do these words even mean?" Right? He says, I said, I said, Ze Ivrit. It's Hebrew, transcendental. So he's like, but he used to words like that. And
Nochach and Nistar is
yes,
typically
right.
how they would
And
say
he
it. Yeah.
was, but he was just a mind that was
He once asked me, he goes, "Did you ever read Jules Verne?" Like at the beginning of an answer. I asked him something. He goes, "Did you ever read Jules Verne?" And I said, I think it was particularly 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea he was referring to. And then I said, yes. And then he said, well, on this part, remember when it said, it was just like so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous.
yeah.
I once asked him, I had a friend, Stu Cornfield. Remember Stu Cornfield? He
Yes.
should continue to be well. So he was going to Hebrew U at the time that we were going to a yeshiva. At first, he went to Shalavim, then he went to Hebrew U. And so he'd always throw out some kind of challenging question to learning. So he said that the whole notion of creation ex nihilo, yesh me'ayin, that that it's a modern concept. It's not an ancient concept. This is what he said. So somehow I was doing some research and I saw that it was referred to in the Sefer Yetzirah, and I naively went up to Reb Shlomo Fisher and I said the Sefer Yetzirah is miyuchas to Avram Avinu. It's the ideas are meant to go back to Avram Avinu. So I said, does that mean that if the Sefer Yetzirah makes reference to Yesh Mi'ayin, that this has been a concept that's been known in the world since Avram Avinu? So then, and he says to me, well, I know it's miyuchas to Avram Avinu, but really, if you look at it, it's written in the language of the Mishnah. He was saying it's probably, a little bit post Mishnah, probably. But he knew the quote. So all I said was I heard, and then he just like knew the quote I was talking about, and he says the quote. Like people were coming up to him, like you said, with all manner of things. It could require him to quote Jules Verne, or it's the Sefer Yetzirah, or
he knew the sine, cos, and tan tables, the trigonometric tables. I saw a copy in his house, and I asked his daughter what it's there. She says, "My father knows them." So
I'm not sure what they are, but
it's
something my father knows.
He does mathematical calculations and geometry, and he knows these tables. And I was actually wondering about. I was going to ask him, someone said to me, you should not buy Hanukkah presents. It's not appropriate to buy Hanukkah presents. So I was in his house, and I see there's a Hirsch Chumash on the shelf in Hebrew. I pull it out and I open it, and it says it's a Hanukkah present from him to his wife.
Awesome.
I remember, I think if I recall correctly, you and I walking up the hill to the bus stop.
Okay. In Itri. We're talking about Itri. Yeah.
And you can see the 21 bus
was
idling at the bus stop. So now it was always an issue. I can see the 21 bus. That means if it's idling at the bus stop, should I sprint like crazy to get the bus or not? Now, I remember we were discussing this, and we were saying that, well, you know how it is. If you're supposed to get the bus, you'll get it, right? And if you're not, maybe it's divine providence. And then as we're discussing this, Reb Shlomo Fisher rushes by us up the hill towards the bus. Yeah. And we said
it could have been his version of walking, though, because some of those people he walked very fast.
Yeah. So we say, okay, we ran for the bus. We're wrong. This is from Shlomo Fisher. And I remember I once asked him a question, and again, this is so long ago, I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but he said it was a question on the Gemara. And he says, why did Hashem speak to Moshe? What prompted Hashem to speak to Moshe the first time? Which has nothing to do with what I was asking him.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know, he saw the burning bush. He said, yep. So he says he turned his head to the side. I said, okay. And I'm wondering where he's going with this. He says, if you turn your head to the side of the page, you'd see that it references the Rambam.
No way.
And if you look at the Rambam, he explains the Gemara.
Oh, nice. Nice. Oh, that's awesome.
So
That's absolutely awesome.
yes, that was a great moment. Um,
One
and
time, Akiva Turk, who became Akiva Tor, our friend, and we were learning Kuzari Bein Hastarim. I may have already mentioned this once, but I'm saying it again because we're talking about Reb Shlomo Fisher. That we were learning Kuzari Bein Hastarim, and which meant that on more than one occasion we would have a question and go up to Reb Shlomo Fisher afterwards because he was the one we felt was the appropriate person to go to if you had a question about the Kuzari. And so somehow we had gotten into a discussion about um, cause and effect, and whether it's possible that um, that ultimately the world is, what is the word for that? Because I just lost the word. When everything is just
predetermined.
predetermined, yeah. So is it possible to have Torah in a world that is technically predetermined, which would mean without real
Free will.
free will? Now, there might be something called free will, but it wouldn't ultimately be free will. So at first he said to us, it is possible. He said it would be, and if you ask yourself, so why is there schar va'onesh? You could say, like with a dog, it's behavioral. You like with a dog, there's
Yeah.
punishment or reward because you're
that.
trying to, yeah. But then the next day he called us back and he told us, I changed my mind. You can't say it. Now there was, and he never clarified to us what he was originally thinking or what he was thinking afterwards. But we left like in the afternoon thinking one thing, which was very startling to us that he said it. But then the next morning he called us back and goes, I changed my mind. You can't say it. You would then. So I don't know what was happening. He was obviously working on something at that time because and then also during that Seder, there was a guy who came from the Gush that Akiva knew, who had been sent by the Rabbonim at Gush to come to learn with Reb Shlomo Fisher, because this guy was going to be studying philosophy in Columbia the next year, and they wanted him to have some kind of exposure to a Talmud Chacham in the area of philosophy. Yeah, right. Yeah. So this guy, he goes in for his first time, has no idea what to expect. And he comes out, he is like, you could see he's like completely wiped out. And he came over, he's a friend of Akiva's. He's had to explain what happened. He said, he started talking and it was just about Aristotle. He never spoke about anything else this whole time. It was like 2 hours. And it was all about Aristotle because he said, until I understand Aristotle, I'm not going to understand the Rambam. And he felt, and so imagine somebody who looked like him,
Yerushalmi, to those who have not seen him, Yerushalmi with payas and a beard.
And a flat. He didn't just have like a Yerushalmi hat. He had a flat hat. He had the Yerushalmi stripe.
Yes.
He was told, and he just, and he lived in the dorms 5 days a week.
World literature, science, philosophy.
It was just like how
the entire Torah on his fingertips. Entire Torah.
Like how was it to us? It was just like, how is it possible that he could that he knew all this stuff, and he did. I mean, it was clear that he did. Yeah.
So look, we didn't get through all of our.
No, we just scratched the surface.
Just scratch the surface because these people are we're all amazing and giants. But hopefully people have a taste of a little bit.
Right, and especially Rabbi Gurvitz, who he was an important part of our lives.
You can access his Divrei Torah, his books, or
Avram, not Dvar Avram, or Avram.
And you can access Rav Shlomo Fisher, although it's almost always goes
out of print.
Printed, as called Beis Yishai, Drush Beis Yishai. He's got two. He's got a Beis Yishai on Shas, on the Talmud, and he's got Drushay Beis Yishai, which are drushim, which are just amazing stuff. If you can get it, just buy a second copy and send it to me. I'll pay for it. And I have one, but I always looking for more. Give to friends. So
you're just trying to make money off it. You figure you
course.
stow it away, you wait for it to go out of print again, and then you make some money. Pay off a chasana.
If you enjoyed this, please do give us a like on YouTube or Spotify, etc., and recommend it to your friends. All two of them.
No, they have more than two friends.
That's true. Yes,
it's the two people.
The two people, your friends. Yes. Okay. You may have many friends. So
yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure they have many friends. We're the ones that don't have many friends. They have many friends.
That is true. Right. Okay. Goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Be well.